Leonardo da Vinci didn't merely exist in the Renaissance, he transcended it. Wherever he walked, people paused not out of reverence but confusion, as if their subconscious registered something they couldn't quite articulate. He didn't belong to their world or even ours. He moved like an idea wearing flesh, an archetype disguised as a man. There are stories of how he walked with such grace and presence that even strangers found themselves mesmerized. Not by fame, not by wealth, but by something else, something metaphysical like the gravitational pull of an awakened soul. Leonardo didn't just possess knowledge, he embodied it. And when you embody knowledge, your very presence disturbs the predictable rhythm of the ordinary. He didn't master a few fields, he devoured them. His intellect was a black hole, pulling in anatomy, engineering, geology, cartography, mathematics, philosophy, optics, architecture, even theatrical design. It said he was fluent in more than 15 disciplines. But this wasn't multitasking. It was integration. He didn't see isolated subjects. He saw systems interwoven, nested within each other like Russian dolls. To him, a bird's wing wasn't just a feat of biology. It was a mechanical principle, a musical rhythm, a symbol of divine proportion. While others memorized facts, he interrogated reality. Every leaf, every ripple in a pond, every angle of shadow on a stone wall, these were not accidents to him. They were encrypted truths. And yet, for all this brilliance, Leonardo's mind was haunted. His notebooks reveal a man in existential crisis. Half scientist, half mystic, obsessed with understanding the machinery of existence. He'd dissect corpses at night, not out of morbidity but in pursuit of form. He needed to know what moved us, literally and metaphorically. There are pages of his journals filled with nothing but questions. Why do people yawn? Where does the soul reside? Why does water curve in certain shapes when poured? These were not eccentricities. They were rituals of perception. Leonardo treated questions like sacramental doors into a deeper reality. The kind of reality most people spend their lives trying to ignore. Modern estimates of his IQ fall between 180 and 220. But that number is meaningless without context. Leonardo's genius wasn't simply in his brain, it was in his way of being. Genius in his case was not a trait. It was a stance. A way of standing before the universe with radical humility and holy hunger. He wasn't obsessed with answers. He was addicted to the space between answers. The liminal tension between knowing and unknowing. Where others sought certainty, he chased ambiguity. And that is precisely what made him dangerous, not in a criminal sense but in the sense that he could not be domesticated. His mind was too alive to be managed. This is why Schopenhauer's quote still echoes with eerie relevance. Talent hits a target no one else can hit. Genius hits a target no one else can see. But Leonardo's genius went even further. He invented the target. He saw what wasn't there yet, what hadn't even been imagined. In an age of rigid categories and fixed truths, he lived as if boundaries didn't exist. And maybe for him they truly didn't. This isn't just about intellectual achievement, it's about psychological freedom. It's about what happens when a person's consciousness becomes so wide, so fluid, so fearless, that even time begins to bend. So the real question is not just how Da Vinci became a genius, but why? Why did he see the world the way he did? What inner forces allowed him to maintain that level of clarity, focus, and wild openness in a world that demands conformity? Was it discipline, madness, trauma, divine favor, or some rare alchemy of all four? And more provocatively, what if you could reclaim even a fraction of that vision in your own life? Not by copying Leonardo, but by understanding the mental architecture behind his curiosity, perception, and integration. Because genius is not a lightning strike. It's a pattern, a behavior, a deep commitment to a kind of awareness that most people will spend their entire lives avoiding. And so, we begin not with his talent nor his skill, but with the very fire that lit them both. His ferocious, almost painful curiosity. The kind that isn't cute or quirky but inconvenient, unrelenting, and at times spiritually exhausting. Because the first law of genius is this: you must be willing to feel the weight of questions most people are too numb to even notice. Section 1. Curiosity as a daily discipline. Albert Einstein once confessed, "I have no special talents. I am only passionately curious." It's a humbling thought, that perhaps what separated him from the millions around him wasn't a superhuman intellect, but an obsessive relationship with the unknown. But while Einstein's curiosity danced through the cosmos and equations, Leonardo da Vinci's was grittier, more embodied. He didn't just question the stars, he interrogated shadows, eyelids, candlelight, and the strange way water curls as it pours. Where Einstein sought the laws of the universe, Leonardo sought the poetry of its details. His curiosity was not a wandering impulse, it was a discipline, a self-imposed ritual. You often wait for inspiration. He hunted it down with a knife and pen. They say curiosity is innate, like a child's wonder at the world. But Da Vinci's life refutes that romantic myth. His journals weren't whimsical musings, they were investigations. You don't accidentally sketch the inner workings of a heart valve with such precision that modern surgeons still study it. That kind of insight requires a patience that borders on obsession. He once wrote over 10 pages on the movement of water in a bucket. He dissected over 30 corpses just to understand how muscles pull at skin during a smile. You look at a yawn and move on. He looked at a yawn and asked why it exists, what triggers it, whether it spreads through groups, and how it affects the facial muscles. Curiosity was not a hobby for him, it was survival. It gave his mind something sacred to burn through. He watched dragonflies in flight, not for beauty but to decode their wing mechanics. He wanted to build flying machines not because he wanted to fly, but because he needed to understand how flight worked. Most people stare at the moon and see a light in the sky. Leonardo wrote about how moonlight is a reflection of Earth's oceans and speculated about Earthshine centuries before science confirmed it. He lived in a world of signs, each phenomenon hinting at a deeper architecture beneath. He wasn't trying to be creative. He was trying to see clearly. And seeing clearly in a world addicted to dullness, that's a revolutionary act. There's a falsehood we carry, that curiosity is magic, that it visits us like lightning. But Leonardo knew better. Curiosity is a muscle. It must be fed, stretched, challenged. Left unused, it calcifies into cynicism or boredom. You know this because you felt it, the slow deadening of your mind under the daily weight of routine. But Leonardo used boredom like a blade. He weaponized it. He would often let his thoughts idle just long enough to ask the question behind the question. Why does boredom exist? What purpose does it serve? He discovered what Newton would later stumble upon beneath the apple tree, that idle time is not wasted, it is incubational. Most people flee it. Leonardo waited in it. This is where modern life becomes toxic to genius. You carry a device in your pocket that kills every chance your mind has to get bored. Every gap is filled with noise. Notifications rob you of the quiet in which deep questions emerge. Leonardo's mind was free because it wasn't fractured. He didn't scroll. He stared. He sat with thoughts until they squirmed. That's what you're missing. The courage to sit with the silence long enough for something original to surface. Not because it's productive, but because it's necessary. When you refuse to be distracted, your inner architecture begins to whisper secrets it's been holding on to for years. Leonardo didn't have better tools than you. He had better attention. While others moved on, he stayed. While others asked one question, he asked 20. He didn't accept surfaces. He dug until he hit bone. That's the discipline. It's not a mood or a mood board or a morning routine. It's a willingness to let curiosity disrupt your life. And it will. Real curiosity is not convenient. It will wreck your schedule, your assumptions, even your sense of self. But in the rubble, something extraordinary emerges. A mind capable of transformation. The kind of mind that sees the unseen and calls it forward. Curiosity, then, is not the fuel that powers creativity, it's the fire itself. It's what keeps the engine hot, the questions alive, the vision unstable enough to evolve. You can't fake it. You can't schedule it. But you can cultivate the conditions for it. You can choose to slow down, stare longer, ask deeper. The world isn't lacking answers. It's starving for better questions. And the moment you begin asking them, not to impress but to awaken, you step onto the same psychological terrain Leonardo walked every day. And once you're there, there's no going back. But curiosity, no matter how ferocious, is only half the equation. The real transformation begins when you learn to see what no one else is looking at, and draw it. Because seeing isn't the end. Expression is. In the next section, we'll explore how Leonardo's inner vision demanded a kind of sacred translation, through art, through diagrams, through relentless sketching, and how his compulsive need to record what he saw shaped the birth of genius. Section 2. Mastery through observation and mental precision. You often assume that greatness comes from extraordinary output, paintings, books, inventions, but Leonardo's true mastery came from input. Before he ever created, he observed. Before the brush met canvas, his mind scanned shadows, movement, and emotional tension in the air like radar. He trained his vision not just to see objects but to perceive the forces behind them. One of his mental training exercises was deceptively simple. Stare at a stained or cracked wall until you begin to see landscapes, animals, or battle scenes hidden in the chaos. It wasn't just imagination, it was mental sharpening. He wanted to condition his eyes to find patterns where others saw noise. To train perception as a discipline, not a passive state. Because in a world that assaults you with endless stimuli, seeing clearly becomes a kind of rebellion. Leonardo's visual gifts were not merely the result of talent, they were forged through deliberate strain. Most people blink and miss the details. Leonardo didn't. His eyes had an exceptionally rare neurological trait, what modern science calls a high flicker fusion frequency. It means he could detect the flickering of light and movement at speeds imperceptible to most humans. While others saw stillness, he saw motion in its early stages. But this was not static ability, it was something he trained. He would sit for hours watching the way candlelight dances in a draft, how smoke curls upward then collapses inward. His eyes were instruments, tuned like violins, meant not only to capture what was visible but what was emerging. You don't develop that kind of perceptual acuity by accident. You do it through daily, silent warfare against mental laziness. There's a reason Leonardo was the first to notice that dragonflies move their wings asynchronously. To everyone else, they were a blur. To him, they were code, wings and rhythmic tension, two pairs moving in alternate time. It's a simple fact today validated by high-speed cameras. But he saw it in the 1500s. With nothing but his eyes. That discovery wasn't a party trick. It was a consequence of deep, sustained attention. You live in a world of high-speed distractions and artificial clarity, video replays, filters, slow motion. But he had none of that. His eyes were the camera. His brain the recorder. And this ability to penetrate beneath the surface of movement is exactly what gave his art an impossible vitality. It wasn't just that he saw the world, it's that he saw into it. Take the Mona Lisa for instance. You've seen the smile, but have you felt it shift while looking? That's no illusion, it's precision. Leonardo layered the edges of her mouth using a technique he perfected called sfumato, a way of blending tones so subtly that there are no harsh lines, only gentle transitions. He understood that human emotions don't live in outlines, they glide. That's why the Mona Lisa feels like she knows something you don't. Because her expression is not fixed, it exists in flux. You can't point to the moment she starts smiling, nor the moment she stops. That's not by mistake. That's the work of someone who studied grief, serenity, amusement, and restraint as if they were anatomical structures. He used observation not only to capture the outer form but to trace the inner pulse of feeling as it moved beneath the skin. This level of visual precision has modern parallels in domains you wouldn't expect, like baseball. Ted Williams, arguably the greatest hitter in MLB history, could see the seams of a baseball as it traveled at 90 miles per hour. Not because he was superhuman, but because he trained for it. He studied ball rotation, arm angles, even the microsecond flicker in a pitcher's release. Williams wasn't reacting, he was reading. Just like Leonardo, he practiced the art of seeing before he ever swung. Mastery, whether on canvas or in the batter's box, is rooted in perception. And perception, if trained correctly, becomes predictive. It allows you to anticipate what others only react to. That's not instinct. That's vision turned into a weapon. Leonardo intuitively grasped what modern science now calls psychophysics, the study of how physical stimuli translate into psychological experience. He didn't just paint light. He painted the feeling of light. How it spills across a face, how it softens time, how it can wound or soothe depending on its temperature and angle. He would adjust shadows not to match realism but to match emotional realism. That's a deeper truth than accuracy. It's not enough to make something look right, you have to make it feel right. And feelings don't obey logic. They obey atmosphere, rhythm, and subtle distortion. This is what separates technique from mastery. Anyone can paint what's there. Only a genius paints what's felt. You've likely underestimated your own eyes. You think of vision as passive, as something that just happens. But Leonardo's life shows otherwise. Seeing is a muscle. You can train it. You can sharpen it. You can learn to detect nuance, motion, shifts in facial expression, color, temperature, and emotional tone. You can learn to see how people lie with their eyes and speak without words. But it takes time. It takes stillness. It takes a level of daily awareness that most people are too mentally fragmented to sustain. But if you can begin, even for 10 minutes a day, to stare longer, to notice more, to track change across time, you will begin to see a different world than everyone around you. Not because the world changed, but because you did. And this is the uncomfortable truth. Most people will never see deeply. Not because they can't, but because they won't. They are too distracted, too anxious, too impatient. They live in reaction, not reflection. But Leonardo's genius was built on exactly what modern people fear: quiet observation. In that stillness, he discovered patterns that no one had language for yet. He gave shape to forces others didn't know existed. And it all started by staring at cracked walls, candle smoke, and the skin beneath a smile. The next time you look, really look, remember that genius may begin not in action but in attention. But seeing was only half the process. Leonardo's mind wasn't just a mirror, it was a forge. He took what he observed and subjected it to mental experiments, inner simulations, and ruthless abstraction. In the next section, we explore how he mentally constructed ideas before they ever existed, through a process of internal testing, inversion, and imagination so advanced that it bordered on prophecy. Section 3. Integration, Motion, and Organized Madness. They say madness and brilliance often share a common border, and Leonardo da Vinci lived right on that edge, dancing between calculated hesitation and divine insight. His creative process defied the modern obsession with speed and productivity. He would stare at a wall, a canvas, or a mechanical design for hours without touching it, only to make a single deliberate mark and walk away. That wasn't laziness, it was spiritual focus, an understanding that the mind sometimes needs stillness to allow something deeper to rise. You often try to force progress, believing movement equals productivity, but Da Vinci teaches otherwise. There's genius in retreat, clarity in delay, meaning in what looks like procrastination. That hour of stillness was when his mind traveled furthest, testing angles, feeling the essence of the idea, waiting for the moment when doing became necessary. His brush didn't just apply paint, it resolved a war between vision and intuition that had quietly taken place beforehand. You've probably been told that success belongs to those who hustle non-stop, that idle hands are wasted potential. But Leonardo inverted that logic. He practiced what we might call deliberate procrastination, an intentional pause that lets the unconscious mind do its slow alchemy. His notebooks reflect this rhythm. Pages and pages of sketches, questions, fragmented thoughts. He wasn't waiting passively, he was harvesting possibilities. In this way, procrastination became an active tool, not a defect. He once said that men of lofty genius accomplish the most when they appear to do the least, because their minds are occupied with shaping ideas. And isn't that what true creativity is? Letting the unseen unfold before you try to force it into form? They don't teach this in schools, but those rare few who learn to wait without fear, to pause without guilt, often end up seeing what others miss entirely. The science of creativity has slowly caught up with what Leonardo knew centuries ago. Modern researchers like Sandy Mann have shown that boredom, the right kind of boredom, sparks divergent thinking. In one study, participants who did a dull task like reading a phone book came up with more creative ideas afterward than those who engaged in more active tasks. Why? Because the mind, when not overstimulated, begins to wander and make strange, original connections. You may dismiss boredom as useless, but they who embrace it enter a strange space where imagination becomes unchained. Leonardo mastered this terrain. His boredom was not lethargy, it was incubation. In his silences he gathered invisible threads. In his waiting he saw the shape of genius forming. When others raced ahead, he stood still, and found the path they had overlooked. But it wasn't just stillness that gave birth to his genius, it was motion. Leonardo walked constantly, hiked through the Italian countryside, and maintained physical strength well into old age. In Florence, he was known for his athleticism and could bend horseshoes with his bare hands. You may think of brilliance as something isolated in dusty rooms or ivory towers, but the truth is, physical vitality often fuels intellectual vitality. Neuroscience now tells us that aerobic movement, like walking, boosts cognitive flexibility. Walking isn't just exercise for the body, it's motion for the mind. Steve Jobs and Nietzsche both walked to think. So did Leonardo. As his feet moved, his thoughts found rhythm. They say neurons that fire together wire together, but it turns out neurons also walk with you, syncing patterns, breaking rigid thought loops, making new connections in the space your body creates. They understood this once. You can remember it now. What's often forgotten is how Leonardo didn't compartmentalize life the way most do. He didn't separate science from art or logic from feeling. To him, they were all reflections of the same underlying unity. He wrote, "To develop a complete mind, study the art of science, study the science of art." He saw the visible and the invisible as partners in perception. You tend to divide your life, work, passion, logic, emotion, but Leonardo collapsed those walls. He believed understanding was integrative, not fragmented. That's how he became not just a great painter, but a visionary in anatomy, engineering, geology, architecture, and philosophy. He didn't learn different fields, he learned how to see the connections between them. They who see the links others ignore end up inventing the future. But a mind like his can't operate purely from memory. It needs external scaffolding, a mirror to reflect its ongoing chaos. That's why Leonardo carried a notebook everywhere. His notes weren't orderly reports. They were raw, scattered fragments, obsessive questions, quick sketches, lists that jumped from anatomy to music to fortification techniques. You likely keep notes for reminders. He used them to map his inner cosmos. In one of his journals, a simple to-do list reads, "Draw Milan. Ask Maestro Antonio how mortars are placed. Study the jaw of a crocodile." There's something holy in that, organizing madness into method without killing its spirit. You forget that your mind was never meant to be a warehouse. It was meant to be a forge, and notes are sparks keeping it lit. You might imagine that geniuses are born with their brilliance, but Da Vinci proves otherwise. His genius was built, pattern by pattern, over years of looking deeply, thinking slowly, moving often, and writing obsessively. They built their wisdom through habit, not magic. He didn't wait for inspiration, he cultivated it. He didn't chase genius, he lived in its daily rituals. If you want to think like him, you must begin to live like him. Open your eyes. Move your body. Allow your mind to wander. Take notes like you're mapping another dimension. Because that's exactly what he was doing. And so, you come to the edge of something deeper, not just admiration for Da Vinci but an invitation. You've seen his habits, traced his thoughts, and now the question turns inward. Are you ready to train your own mind in the art of seeing what no one else can? In the next section we'll dive into the most timeless insight of all, his ability to see everything as connected. As you reflect on Leonardo da Vinci's life, it's clear that his genius was not the result of some divine spark, but rather the product of deliberate cultivation, of seeing the world not as a collection of isolated facts, but as an intricate system of interconnected ideas. He understood that brilliance comes from an unwavering commitment to curiosity, a willingness to explore even the most obscure of questions, and the patience to let those questions simmer until the answers arrived on their own terms. This was his true genius, not in the answers he found but in his method of seeking. For Da Vinci, the process was just as valuable as the product, and perhaps even more so. You too can adopt this mindset, relishing the act of discovery as much as the knowledge itself. To be like Da Vinci, you must not only learn but live in the question, the uncertainty, and the restless pursuit of understanding. But there's a deeper lesson within his life and work. Da Vinci exemplifies the power of integration, the ability to weave together disparate elements of life and knowledge into a cohesive whole. Science, art, anatomy, philosophy, he saw them as different facets of the same gem. His genius wasn't divided by boundaries, but united by the belief that true wisdom requires the fusion of seemingly incompatible worlds. In a world that increasingly demands specialization, Da Vinci stands as a reminder of the power in interdisciplinary thinking, of synthesizing knowledge across fields to see a fuller, richer version of reality. You may not be able to paint the Mona Lisa or design a flying machine, but you can live with the same integrative mindset, using every experience, every discipline, every insight to fuel the next. Ultimately, Da Vinci's life is a call to embrace complexity, patience, and above all, an active participation in the world around you. His genius didn't simply reside in his exceptional intelligence, but in his ability to step back, observe, and let his mind work through the chaos to uncover patterns that others missed. In your own life, you too can learn to embrace the unpredictable, the fragmented, and the unfinished, knowing that genius is built not in moments of grand insight, but in the slow, deliberate act of weaving ideas together over time. It's a reminder that you're not simply a passive recipient of knowledge, but an active creator of meaning, one brushstroke at a time. As you continue your own journey, remember, the patterns of genius are within your reach if you're willing to see them.